Greetings everyone, this is Rambling Collector, back here with another book review for all of you today. And I know, it seems kind of crazy that I'm publishing another video already, as I've just finished one as of yesterday. But this book I had rapidly sped through yesterday after finishing that review, because I was eager to talk about it with all of you today. So, the subject of today's video will be Norse Myths, edited by Jake Jackson. So, let's get started. So as I'm sure some of you are wondering, why Norse mythology in particular? Well, to put it simply, growing up I was a huge fan of Greek mythology. I loved taking the classes from it in school, as well as also I loved reading the Percy Jackson series. But, more often than not I heard of other mythologies, such as Norse or Roman, which is basically the same as Greek, but whatever, as well as so many others. Foreign mythologies have always fascinated me in how they have their different deities, their different cultures, everything else. But primarily Greek mythology was one of the biggest ones for me, but now, as of late, I've had more of a fascination with the Viking civilization, their customs, their culture, their gods. And as such, when I saw this book hanging around in a nearby convention that I went to, I immediately had to pick it up, because I was curious to learn more about this complete group of other foreign gods, specifically the Norse mythologies, because the Vikings' warrior culture kind of calls to me in a way, as I'm sure a lot of you have probably felt the same way, at least to some degree. But, I don't know, there's just a fascination, a certain calling from this mythology that fascinated me. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the book itself, shall we? So let me first start by giving my overall thoughts on the book. First of all, I feel that this gives a very good overview of the many gods and goddesses within Norse mythology, as well as the many creatures such as fairies, dwarves, and of course the dark elves. But more than that, it also gives some great stories regarding the big three, them being Odin, Thor, and Loki, whom I was actually very surprised to see he was not a relatable character like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has made him out to be. Loki is a pure villain, plain and simple. And in fact, it even shows him destroying Valhalla and Asgard as a villain during Ragnarok, including how he spawned the three monsters that would bring about the end of the world, including Hel, ruler of the dead, Fenris, the great wolf, and of course, the world serpent, who forms the symbol of the Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. And that alone is terrifying, all on its own. But also, more than that, it not only filled me in on those deities, but it also filled me in on two of the greatest stories in Norse mythology, that being of Sigurd and Frithiof. And I apologize if I butcher those names. That is how I pronounce them in my head. Forgive me if they were wrong. But another interesting topic is that right after learning about all of this, learning about the various stories of Norse mythology, it actually goes on in this book to give a comparison between Greek and Norse, and how very much alike the different pantheons, very much how similar they are to each other. And I actually found that little bit of studying fascinating, especially when it came to the kings and rulers and the high gods and all that stuff. I thought that was pretty interesting. But more than that, I liked how this book also gives a great picture of, it paints a beautiful picture of Viking culture. It gives you right into the heart of it, and how they respect warriors, how they respect builders, and not so much on tricksters. But more than that, the Norse gods I felt had a lot of human characteristics, a lot of very humanistic traits. They played jokes, they loved to live life. They sometimes venture out to see the world that they have created, and in some cases they have jealousy. They get into fights, things like that happen. There's brotherhood, there's family, there's great love. And I like the fact that there's such human characteristics. It makes them feel far more relatable, in my honest opinion. And I really liked how it showed the various tales of Odin, Thor, and Loki, but more than that, it doesn't leave out the other minor deities as well. It gives them all a chance in the spotlight to produce their own stories. Stories of which I'm about to talk about in this next section of the video. Speaking of which, so random thoughts, aka word vomit, where I'm just going to start rambling about the things that I loved about this book. So please bear with me on this one. If I start talking fast, I apologize. So, first of all, I love the story of the creation of the universe in Norse mythology, how it exhibits a ginormous titan known as Ymir, and his corpse helps to make up the 9 realms, especially Midgard, Asgard, all of that. I liked how it shows that with Odin and the others just coming forth from this giant, or defeating him in a way, and creating the world from that. I liked that. This shows like the conquest, the fight. It really indicates how Vikings are warriors at heart. Warriors and conquerors in many cases. Or even just builders of agriculture, things of that nature. But also, again, one thing that I definitely liked was some of the stories that were told, especially involving Thor. First of all, I liked how Thor himself was not portrayed as like this blonde, majestic person like he is shown in the Marvel comics. I'm guessing they did that just to kind of differentiate him from the actual Norse myths, but whatever. So Thor is, as a matter of fact, a redhead. Surprisingly enough, I don't know what that has to entail, but whatever, it's just a fun little fact. He's got like a full mane of red hair and a red beard, and I think that's totally cool. But more than that, detailing his wife, Sig, and how she at one point had a beautiful mane of golden hair that was shorn off by Loki in a fit of desire for that hair, only for Loki to panic and then go to the dwarves to have them fashion a new wig for Sig. And I gotta say, watching Thor get absolutely livid at Loki's crime was just amazing, especially seeing how Loki's just like, oh no, I've done goofed again. But also, again, so with Thor, I like how some of the stories for him are both funny, but also just like, that did not happen. Such as one time, when a frost giant actually steals Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and he has to dress up as the Queen of the Gods. Literally, Thor had to dress up in drag to disguise himself, because the giant would not give up the hammer unless he was allowed to marry the Queen of the Gods. Like, both Thor and Loki were begging the woman to help them out, and she was like, no. So then Thor's just like, alright, fine, I'll dress up as her. And they trick this giant all the way through until the end, when Thor just more than happily smashes Mjolnir into the frost giant's face, still dressed up in wedding garb. I absolutely think that was hilarious. And Loki just keeps trying to cover for him, just saying, oh, she's just excited and filled with passion for you. And the giant just like starts suspecting, he's like, wait a minute, something's going on here. But he doesn't suspect it until like the very last second. I'm sorry, I just think that's funny to me. But, going back to the subject of the gods being human characteristics, one thing with Thor that I liked is one story where he has a frost giant whom is invited to his hall. And the one thing that Thor has to deal with is humiliation. Dealing with his pride as a god. How he views himself as unstoppable. This ultimate warrior who cannot be stopped. With his constant wars against the frost giants and other monsters protecting Asgard, he has a massive ego. I can see that. But this one frost giant manages to humble Thor, making him realize that he is not this unstoppable force, that he can be taken down. And I actually found that pretty interesting, how it shows these mythical deities having moments of humanity that makes them more relatable, more understandable. Now, as for Loki, oh boy, where do I begin with the Mr. Trickster over here? Mr. Hey, I'm a court jester, let me go ahead and make a fool of myself multiple times. I'm just going to say this right out. Loki is a pure villain in Norse mythology, plain and simple. He is irredeemable. And I know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe paints Loki in this anti-villain role, from villain to anti-hero in a way. But I'm just going to say this right out. Loki is irredeemable in the actual Norse mythology. Like, first of all, he is known to steal Thor's hammer. He shears off Thor's wife's hair in a moment of, like, desire, I guess. More than that, he constantly gets himself into trouble and has to trick himself out of it. Except for one time where he actually helps out a family by shearing off a giant's leg and then cauterizing the wounds before it regenerates. That's one of his few good moments. But more than that, more often than not, the times that he has to make up for his mistakes are caused by his own actions. But it all comes to a head when Loki himself, in his jealousy of one of the gods, Balder, someone who would survive the coming apocalypse of Ragnarok, Loki becomes jealous. He lets his jealousy consume him, and visiting the Queen of the Gods, he comes to find out that there is one plant, one thing that can pierce through Balder's protection, and that is mistletoe, tricking Balder's brother to shoot him with an arrow laced with mistletoe, causing the death of one of his fellow gods, spilling blood on Asgard, breaking one of the most sacred rules among the deities. Yeah, Loki deserved his fate of being tied in one of the circles of hell until such time as Ragnarok was commenced. Was it brutal? Yes. Was it deserved? Yes. Killing one of your fellow deities out of sheer jealousy is inexcusable and unforgivable. Like I said, Loki is just a pure villain. And, okay, Ragnarok. I want to talk about that for a second, because let me tell you right now. One thing that I definitely liked about Norse mythology overall is that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a full, complete story to it. With Ragnarok, there comes the end. Everyone has that sense of fate that the world is going to end, so they make the best of the good times that they have right now. I like that. But at the end of it all, with Ragnarok, there are gods that are destined to survive this great apocalypse and have the world be reborn under them. I like that there's a story of a beginning, an end, and a rebirth, which you see with a lot of popular religions. I'm not sure about Greece, or Greek mythology, I need to go back and reread that, but it is a similar vibe to, I want to say, Christianity. I guess there is a beginning, an end, and then a rebirth. And I found that parallel kind of fascinating in a way. But I like how there is this sense of impending doom, yet also hope at the end of it. Okay, I think I've probably rambled long enough on here, so let's get back to another main topic of this book. Okay, so here are my thoughts on the Sigurd saga and the story of Frithiof. And again, I apologize if I've butchered those names. This is just how I picture them pronounced in my head, mentally. Okay, so first of all, these two stories form a massive chunk of the stories within this book. Like, aside from the big three of Odin and Freya and Thor and Loki, the big three, the most well-known of the Norse gods, the stories of Sigurd and Frithiof were, in my personal opinion, fascinating, because it really shows the two biggest heroes of Norse myths, that being the Volsung saga and Frithiof himself, both of whom have major gods actually playing an active part in their lives. For instance, the Sigurd saga visualizes this family of great warriors who has an unstoppable blade that, so long as they wield it, they will always achieve victory. Throughout it all, you have Odin himself, the king of the gods, intervening on their daily lives multiple times. Like, it feels like the Sigurd and the Volsungs themselves were the chosen family of Odin for that time, as you see Odin constantly intervening throughout their quests. And I think you even see that a bit with Frithiof as well, but not as plain as day. as the Sigurd saga. All in all, these two great warriors and leaders, and especially the Sigurd saga with this whole family history laid out before me in this whole story, was fascinating. It gripped me throughout as I was reading it yesterday. I could not put it down hardly. Same thing with Frithiof. But the thing is, both stories, they show struggle, they show triumph, they show despair, they show constant betrayals, as well as various different struggles that they go through. It makes them connectable. And if they were just novels by themselves, I'd read them in a heartbeat. Hell, I'd add them to my collection and read them on a daily basis if I could. I guess I'll just have to settle for the abbreviated version here. But that's just the Volsung saga. Frithiof is a story of pride and love and just the absolute struggle with this man. He wants to marry a beautiful young woman. But the problem is, the two brothers who use magic on the daily are not exactly the nicest people, and they view Frithiof as a mere peasant. They believe that Ingbold is a unworthy prize to Frithiof, that he needs to prove himself. So Frithiof goes off on Viking raids to achieve plunder and tales of his conquests and glory in battle. No matter how many times he is asked these people, he is constantly rejected, he is constantly hated, until at one point he goes on to find that the woman he loves was married off to another king. And this angers him greatly, since he finds the armband that he had given her, that she was only meant to take off if she had given up on him, or if she could not fulfill her promise to marry him, was left on the statue of Balder. And in his rage, Frithiof actually desecrates a temple of Balder. Throughout it all, he feels that he is forbidden to marry this woman, Ingbold, until at last he finally says, "What am I to do?" And he receives a vision to rebuild the temple of Balder as grander and much more splendid than it was before. And in my personal opinion, having these two main gods, Balder and Odin, being involved in these two main heroes' lives really shows just how sometimes they always have their chosen champions, like, say, Heracles in Greek mythology, or Perseus, or Theseus, all of them. Both mythologies have their chosen heroes, and that's what the Sigurd saga and Frithiof really speaks to me, is that these are some of the chosen heroes of that tale, of this mythology. It's fascinating. It's interesting. And I know I keep saying fascinating and interesting, but that's just the way it is. This is my first steps into really looking at Viking culture. So everything to me is just bright and new and... Okay, I'm rambling again. So let's go ahead and get to wrapping this up, shall we? So, with all that being said, if it wasn't obvious already, I'm going to give Norse Myths by Jake Jackson a solid 10 out of 10. For giving me a great introduction to Norse mythology in itself, as well as kind of helping to feed my current Viking obsession. Oh Lord, if you all see more Viking books popping up, I'm sorry. Okay, anyways. But again, I do feel like this is a great introduction to Norse mythology, as well as Viking stories in general, or just giving you a taste of Viking warrior culture. Anyways, if you guys have any other book recommendations for me, or if you want me to check out other mythologies in the future, please feel free to let me know. I'm more than happy to take any suggestions you all may have. And if you like this video, feel free to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and if you like what I do here, feel free to subscribe. And once again, thank you all for listening to this crazy man's ramblings. I cannot thank you all enough for bringing this channel further. And if you want to check out more of the books that I review, feel free to click on my playlist for book reviews right here. And once again, I'm open to any and all suggestions. So, once again, you guys, thank you so much for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now. Have a great day, fellow readers.